Hey, Ghost Machine fans, this one's for you.
Welcome to the Ghost Machine Fans Podcast, episode 35. I am your usual Canadian Redcoat aficionado, guest co-host Michael Schwartz, and I'm here to deep dive into Redcoat number 7. As always, I'm joined by my compatriots, Nick and Snoggle, friends Simon Pure and Albert Einstein. Bring us together again. How is everyone doing?
I'm doing awesome. It's great to hear your voice again, Michael, and be talking about Redcoat. There's a lot to talk about tonight.
It's the big one. The
big one. It's been a build up. I think even back as far as when we did our interview with Brian, remind me, Snoggle, did he mention that this was the issue where there would be a catharsis?
Yeah, I think he might have said 6 and 7. But 7 would be like, oh.
And I think at New York Comic Con, he said he was excited to hear us talk about this issue in particular.
So he'll be listening.
Oh,
no
boy.
Pressure.
Yeah, there's a lot of pressure here.
That is awesome. Well, it's a pivotal issue, as we mentioned in a recent Instagram, very serious Instagram reel that we posted about this. So before we get into it, though, we've got a shout out and some news. So this shout out this time goes to Henrock1_12, which is HENROC, the number 1, underscore the number 1, the number 2 on Instagram. He is a toy photographer, and he has been sharing some incredible images of his work with the Mezco Junkyard Joe figure. It's also really cool that if you take a look at what this person is doing with the photography and the composition, it shows you how much the figure can do and how much it can pose, and really it's on another level. So big shout out to Henrock1_12 on Instagram. Go ahead and give him a follow. And I did want to also let you both and the listeners know that our Thanksgiving Fan Friday is going to be all about Junkyard Joe toy photography, because while Henrock has been leading the charge, there is a whole lot of other people who have been doing similar things and making really cool stuff with that Junkyard Joe action figure from Mezco.
When are we getting our Redcoat
figure?
Yeah, when are we getting it, Mezco? That's what I'm wondering.
I need Simon.
You need a little bit of Simon. Would you keep Simon in a box? Would you buy 2, one to open, one?
No, we put him on the mantle.
Okay, I'd probably buy 2. I'd have to take one out of the box for sure. I would think that maybe Mezco is such a high-end brand, and this figure is really, really neat. If we're going to see a full line of figures, they might have to go knocking on the door of a different toy manufacturer who we're rather fond of around here. I guess we'll have to see. Okay. I thought it was pretty interesting that Todd stopped by the Ghost Machine booth at the New York Comic Con when you were there.
Curious.
That's interesting. But enough about rumors. We want to talk about serious news. And Snoggle is in the newsroom, so I'll get out of here.
I'm in the newsroom. I'm being serious. There was a recent preview for the Rockefellers number 2 that included a 2-page splash showcasing scenes from all 4 Ghost Machine universes. Also, we've seen the solicits for Rockefellers number 4, Redcoat number 10, the Geiger volume number 2, trade paperback, woot woot, Hyde Street number 5, Hornsby and Halo number 4, and Geiger number 11, all due to be released in 2025. That means something to look forward to next year. The Ghost Machine trend does not appear to be slowing down anytime soon. Are you guys excited about those?
Yes.
Oh, are you?
Yes.
I feel like, yeah, that's my pull list. You just like listed my.
Yeah.
I've had to, I've cut back quite a bit with what I get from the comic shops. Now, I basically just wrote down, just get me Ghost Machine, please.
Isn't it awesome how many different titles are slated to come out that far in the future? I do believe that most of these solicits were for releases that are going to be in February or later. And it just really speaks to the foresight that they've got. And like they're not stopping. And the reason that so many of us are really excited about this is because these ongoing series are truly going to be ongoing in the traditional sense. Mm-hmm. And every time I see something like this, it makes me feel that much better about how that's happening. I could not be happier about that.
When does first Ghost begin?
It's in 2025. Sorry.
Yeah, there's no date yet. I don't think there's a date yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next year.
Yeah. Yep. And so is Soulless, which is going to be, I think, Lamont McGee's book, and that's coming out next year. First Ghost is coming out next year, and we're all really excited for that one.
Mm-hmm.
There's a little bit more news. I'm going to hijack the newsroom. I've done it before. I'll do it again.
You do it often.
It's pretty important because this news also involves our guest co-host. So there is something called the Nerd Initiative. They're rather well known out there. They have a podcast and other things, and they do lots of cool things in the industry. They have an annual award that they give out called the Cheersies. And there's a lot of different categories related to the comic book industry. And I want to read off all the amazing Ghost Machine creators and titles that have been nominated for this, because you do want to make sure that you go vote on this. So first, we've got Best Letterer, Rob Lee, for All the Things. Next, we've got Best Colorist for Brad Anderson on almost all the things. There's a handful of books he doesn't color. For Best Artist, there are 3 Ghost Machine people nominated. Jason Fabok for Rook Exodus, Gary Frank for Geiger, and Brian Hitch for Redcoat that we're reading today. Then we've got Best Writer, Jeff Johns. That's a competitive one. We'll hear about another very, very high-profile writer that Jeff is competing with in a moment. Best Editor is Brian Cunningham. Best Ongoing Series, Rook Exodus, Geiger, Redcoat, all nominated. Best Debut Issue, Hyde Street #1. Issue of the Year, It Happened on Hyde Street, Devour #1. Woo! Here's the big ticket item, though. We also want to give a shout out to Michael Schwartz. That's right, the one that's on the show right now. He is also nominated for a Cheersies for Best Writer. He's going up against Jeff Johns, Patton Oswalt, other people like that.
It makes no sense. So let me stop you there. I'm still like, what?
It's true. High five. Congratulations.
I still don't believe it. Okay. Continue.
There's more. Wait, there's more.
There's going to be it's going to be an April Fool's joke. At some point, someone's going to be like, just kidding.
Hey, it's a great comic book, man. And your comic is also nominated for Best Indie Series, Best Debut Issue, so that's competing with Hyde Street. And Ismael Hernandez, whom we've sung the praises of before, is also nominated for Best Artist against the people we mentioned before. And I do believe that the publisher of your book, Clover, is also nominated for Best Kickstarter. So,
yeah,
way to go. That's really cool, man.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Yeah. How do we vote? You said we can vote.
Yeah.
You gotta vote.
Where? Let's say I Googled it while you were talking.
I'm sure Nerd Initiative's website would have a link.
I tried to find it.
So the voting for this runs all the way until December 3rd at 9:00 at night. And then there's going to be an award show that airs on Monday, December 30th. That's the Nerd Initiative doing the show at 8:00 at night. There's no limit on the voting. Make your voice heard. You can also write in if you want to say you want to nominate other people. So in order to vote, you can go on our Instagram and you'll notice that we have a post about this. I also am rather certain that if you go ahead and just Google Nerd Initiative or the Cheersies, that's Cheersies, you can find it there. But the link for it is also in the post that we put up about it recently. So yeah, make sure to get your vote in. That's pretty neat. And congratulations to Ghost Machine, obviously. That's a lot of nominations for a brand new independent title. Very, very, very cool. So, and I did want to mention one other neat thing that we heard about your book is you and your podcast, the other one, the Wizards podcast, Wizards Guide to Comics. You guys are putting out a 1/2 issue for Armored, like old school style, right?
Yeah, when they, after I had joined the podcast, they said, we really want to do a half issue, just one single one, like they used to do, and I at first I thought they were kidding, but they were serious, and they basically are funding this thing. This is all through them. It's all independent from Clover. I wrote the script. I got Ishmael on board. And then there's all this extra content. It's like a lot of stuff you'd see in the old Wizard magazines. Like some of the features that would be in there will be here, but Armored related. And on top of that, Adam, who is one of the co-creators of the podcast, he's actually doing a whole article about the history of half issues from Wizard. He interviewed Gareb Shamus, who was the owner of Wizard magazine, and he's interviewed a lot of other Wizard staffers about half issues. And we're also going to do a comprehensive guide to collecting half issues. So it's not just an Armored book. It really ties into Wizard quite a bit. Yeah.
That's very, very cool. Awesome. Well, way to go. Well, I've checked out all of the above.
And it's exclusive to Kickstarter. This will not be in stores. It's a one-off thing for Kickstarter.
Oh, okay. So I don't have to cut out a half a page of one of my Armored comics and fill out a coupon and send it somewhere?
On issue 1, you have to cut off the cover. It has to be the Jay Lee cover.
Oh, no. The red foil one only, too, right? That's funny. All right. Well, enough about your silly comic book. We're here to talk about Redcoat. And it's a bright and shiny, jovial, happy story that we have to talk about today. So I did want to talk about the covers, as we always do. There were 3 different covers this time. I absolutely love the A cover, which is the Brian Hitch, Brad Anderson cover, where you have Simon standing very, very much alone. And there's just even blackness around and behind him. What did you two think of this?
Correlates to when him and Albert Einstein were in the dark talking to each other in that issue.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I see it as Redcoat's infinite loneliness. He will always be alone. Mm-hmm. This is the one theme that keeps coming up.
Yes, that's how I felt about it as well. It highlighted his solitude. It emphasized to me that even though he and Albert got reunited at the end of the last issue, even then they said Albert was going to go back to Germany at the time and do his thing. And so here we have Simon again alone in the river with all the fish just swimming by. He's loading a weapon, and it's almost like it seems like it's the start of his tale in this particular moment. But either way, I all I felt was the solitude as well. I thought it was awesome. And the lighting on all of his clothing is just so cool to me. Yeah. What Brad did there. But there are 2 other covers as well, and they're a little bit more metal. Did you all see number 2 by Peralta?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's gorgeous.
Yeah, very cool. He's laying on. And then the last of the 3 connecting variants by V. Ken Marion. Every time I see this guy's artwork, I feel like there should be a guitar riff playing. Dig it. So there's those 3. We've got our covers pointed out. You're considering which one you're going to go pick up at your local comic book shop. But before you do that, there's something absolutely vital that we must do. And what is that, Becky?
If you
got
haven't
this.
read this yet, which I think it came out quite a bit ago, we're a smidgen behind.
Could be. Fine.
Remember?
Fine.
But if you happen to have not read this yet, you need to stop, get in your car to your local comic book shop and purchase it. But you got to read it first because we're about to spoil everything.
And this would not be a good issue for you to like jump into the series with.
This would be the worst to jump in.
It would be a very bad choice. But it's a great book that would be absolutely ruined by jumping into it without the previous 6 issues, that's for sure. But we're going to jump into it right now. And in order to do that, we need to know who were the masterminds behind its creation. So do you think you could give us a creator roll call, Michael?
Can indeed. So the creators are Jeff Johns and Brian Hitch. Inking by Andrew Curry and Brian Hitch. Brad Anderson's the colorist. Rob Lee the letterer. We have Brian Cunningham is the editor-in-chief, an ex-Wizard employee.
Ooh.
Did you know that?
I did.
No.
And Steve Blackwell, I believe also from Wizard. Steve Blackwell, the designer. Yeah.
We've got the usual suspects. And it starts out differently than the other issues that we've had for a while. You know, we've had most things have been right into the action of late. But this scene is different. And so we start out with this full page spread of, he's got 5 empty wine bottles next to his bed and 4 empty plates. As we know, he's super hungry. Looks like he's kind of doing this wastrel thing for all intents and purposes. They can't see it, but Snoggle just made this amazing motion with her hand to her head on the camera because we're doing this via video chat.
He's very
so good.
Hungover dramatic Simon Pure right now.
Hungover dramatic, yeah. And he's just got all those plates because he can't satisfy himself, you know, because he's super duper duper hungry. Now, I'm a big fan of visual storytelling that doesn't require a ton of dialogue or a ton of exposition at all by like a narrator. And that is what appealed to me about these first couple of pages.
Where you can tell like once we turn the page, he's literally just sitting in bed or laying in bed staring at the fan. He's not moving. It's just,
the thing for me is it was clearly establishing we're in a different time period with that fan. Mm-hmm. That's what hit me. I was like, oh, okay.
Yep. We were in a different time period because that was exactly the way that I felt too, because you see it, him looking up at it, and then you zoom in medium and then zoom close up or whatever you would call it. And I agree, Snoggle. It definitely gives you the sense that he's just also in a moment where he's just staring at it. And it gives you a sense of his vibe at the moment too. But that was my thought, was it's not the same time period. And then the bathroom reinforces that to an extent. It does look like mid 20th century bathroom. And what's nice about the panels as they go where he's getting dressed, right? Like it shows a certain degree of care that we normally wouldn't associate with him. And I want to hit you with each one, right? Like there's a panel that shows he clearly just shaved. There's a panel that shows he's going to put his hair up. I don't know if we've seen him do that.
He's got ponytail holders.
He does. You know, shining his shoes. He's got the formal cufflinks. He's clearly polished his sword. I just would love to see this script, right? Like Brian and Jeff writing this script and all the things that they want to say with each beat. Because each beat says, hey, notice this detail and notice this detail and notice this detail. This sincerity is not something you typically associate with this character. And that's why we want to highlight and italicize it.
I hope they include the script in like a hardcover version of this or something. That would be really interesting to see.
That would be cool. For sure.
And I have to say, before we really, can move on forward, Brian is the master when it comes to splash pages and double page splashes. And man, this issue it just starts out with such good splashes. We flip the page and we get that full, clean shaven Redcoat Simon. Have we seen him look this clean?
Mm-mm.
And this, this is a big moment. Whatever is about to happen is a big moment.
And you're absolutely right, because we get him looking at himself in the mirror, clean shaven, and then it's a half a page spread zoomed in, and just okay, yep, that's definitely the most put together we have ever seen this character.
But also,
we've been reading him.
I'd just like to say it's been how many years since 50 years, 60 years since the last issue?
I think like 60 or so years.
60 years, okay.
Yeah.
And he is still, he's clearly in a crappy apartment. It doesn't, he has not changed still. He's cleaner, but he's not, he's not like, who was the villain? What was his name?
Benedict,
thank you.
Benny.
It's harder for a Canadian to come up with these names, it's hard to pull them. I wasn't taught these names like you guys.
Good old Benny.
He's not become a Benedict Arnold in all these years, so that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what you're saying is it's almost as though he didn't take as much from the experience as you may have hoped.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where we go.
Yeah. Right. So we do immediately get even more sense of the specificity of the date range, because when he creaks open the door, you see the front of an automobile. And then, speaking of amazing splash pages, you just, boom, as soon as he walks out, this is the way I would describe this splash page. As soon as he walks out onto the street, you can hear New York.
Yeah. You can feel it.
Looks. Yeah.
It's just feel it, smell it. Yeah.
And the way that Brad made him pop out of the page is still it's awesome. I absolutely love this. And has to hail a taxi. And so we know that's the world he lives in. So not only does he live in a crappy apartment, he doesn't have his own automobile or like a superhero chauffeur or a home base nope, he's getting a taxi.
By the way, if from the first couple of pages, the reader couldn't tell we were in a different time, as soon as you turn to this huge splash page, you definitely know you're okay, well, the movies are out. There's cars. The world has clearly changed since the last episode.
Very cinematic. And he gets in the car. The cabbie gives him a hard time about his getup and how he's dressed. And also,
I've been waiting for that, by the way.
Well, somebody to give him a hard time eventually.
Eventually, someone's you going to a reenactment? What's happening here?
Yeah, nowadays they'd be like, "Are you a LARPer? What are you doing?"
Mm-hmm. Or just one of those guys in Times Square,
Yeah, for sure. And so he has the cabbie stop and says he's just going to be a minute, and he goes into a bar. And here's where I need some help, because I could understand this as two different things. Is he stopping because he wants to get a beer because he's stressed out and doesn't want to think about what's going on? Or is he stopping at the bar where him and Einstein used to stop, like they did at the end of Redcoat 6, and he's having he ordered that for his friend who he knows is about to die?
Yeah, it seems like he's poured one for his friend, right?
Mm-hmm. He doesn't drink it.
Yeah, he doesn't drink it. He leaves it.
So it's not that he's sitting at the bar with only one beer. It's not like there's a beer he drank and then there's a full one for Einstein. So he's sitting there at the bar with only one beer. And we see the next panel of this side profile of him serious, and then the next panel is him walking away from the beer. Like the direction is meant to be like he is turning his back on the alcohol. So I don't know. I might want to ask Mr. Hitch about that one just because part of me was like, oh yeah, that must be like the bar that him and Albert used to go to. But if that was the case, I feel like they would have shown us the sign and there would have been
They are in Boston, so it very well could be.
Yeah, that may be what it is. It almost feels like he stops and chooses not to drink for some reason, but I guess we'll see. Yeah, to me,
he obviously just drank a lot the night prior.
Well, and it seems like he's choosing to be sober in the moment he's about to go to, one way or another.
Yes.
Yeah. And I like that. To me,
to face death, to face it for change, as opposed to run from it. He's no longer running from death. He's walking towards it, and he's running from alcohol. Or walking away from it.
Running.
Walking away diligently from him. Well, either way, the composition was great, you know. And he goes to a hospital, and it's interesting to see as this character appears in different time periods. It's new and different every time, right? Like seeing him in this setting, it's like
nurses are still wearing dresses. How practical!
Yeah, yeah.
When you guys first read this, when you turned the page, did you know it was going to be Albert in that hospital bed?
I did. I knew this was coming. I don't.
What about you, Nick?
You know, the masses got together pretty quickly when the previews for this one were put out, and we're like, because there was a little preview of just the car outside of his house, and at that point, everybody was like, "Oh, it's the 50s! Oh, Einstein's gonna die!" So, I thought that he was, honestly, yes. This is what I thought was going to happen.
I think I'm like the 0.5% who has, I guess, not been on the internet in the last 2 months. And I turned the page and I was like, oh.
Oh, this was a surprise for you?
I should have known. Yeah, it honestly was. And I think I read this, by the way, right after we had that conversation the last time we all recorded. Remember?
Yes.
Where you had asked the question, like, what death do you think would be the craziest? And he said Albert Einstein.
And it is Albert. And the first thing he points out is he's never seen him clean shaven.
There we go. Yep.
But there's this whole deal now between the two of them. And this is where we start to go down the emotional roller coaster. Right? This is where, towards the end of this, after the third, I've read this comic 3 times. The third time was the only time it kind of got me a little bit like, oh man, I'm like, I almost shed a tear for sure. But what is this, what do these next couple of panels really tell us about the characters that we didn't already know? Because we learned some new stuff that's pretty cool.
Well, one thing is, when they first start talking, I have a feeling we're going to get some, in the future, books about the Gettysburg Address and how he stole it and what that has to do with the founding fathers and the magic.
So he says that he's fighting, that he was fighting one of Lenin's soldiers, from the war, somebody named Grigory Tolstoy, and he refers to him as the Russian. And then we get this moment where Simon pulls out his sword and starts swinging around, and he's getting excited about his adventure and the good thing that he did. And he's not like, yeah, me and the Russian guy, we went and got drunk and we didn't think about it. No, he's like, the Gettysburg Address had to be prevented from being stolen, right? And it's just because this awesome, cool adventure happened, and he wants to tell Albert about it. And that to me isn't the same person that was at the end of issue 6, this is more. There's more there.
Yeah.
I think there's genuine excitement too.
Yeah.
It is really cool though, because he says, I hadn't imagined I'd ever encounter a document more powerful than the Constitution, yet with the original Gettysburg Address now I have. So I get the impression that this Tolstoy guy was breaking into the Library of Congress. He stopped him. There was a battle, all this cool stuff. But what we also have to consider now is that who made those documents? Well, the Gettysburg Address was a bit later, but the Constitution, those original documents, they were made by the Founding Fathers. That means those documents probably have very magical properties. Powers. In this environment. And it made me kind of think a little bit about like National Treasure, but way cooler.
Yes.
Because of magic.
Way cooler.
No offense.
Magic versus just puzzles.
Love me some National Treasure, though. Not knocking them there.
Oh my gosh, Nicolas Cage could totally play Simon Pure.
Oh, absolutely. Let's do this. Get on.
I don't know if I'd want to see that. I think I want someone else.
Who would you pick?
I don't know. Come back to me in episode 10.
Chris Hemsworth?
He would work pretty well. You have to admit. He's not American. Sure. He's not American. Although
I know.
He's Simon, so never mind.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he pulled it off. There you go.
Yeah, so he's describing adventures he's had. As I was reading this, I just kept thinking, is this the end of the series? What is happening here?
So you're why did it give you that impression? Why did it sort of
Well, it just felt like, wait a minute, I didn't actually think it that. I knew it was going to continue, but it felt like something you'd see, like this moment at the end of a movie or something. And I guess if we look at the first 6 issues as a movie, and this being the epilogue to it, that's what this is. But I wanted more. I want more of Einstein and him and their adventures. I want Einstein to continue into arc 2, but maybe we'll meet someone else in the second arc.
I have a feeling he comes back, like, as we go, from the timeline from before. It's clear that, like, they had a rift of some sort where Einstein didn't agree. He just, when we turn the page, he says, you and Gregory are not entirely dissimilar in many respects. I still have hope for him to see the error of his ways. So and he's like basically saying that to Simon. Like,
and do you think that's the next arc then? We're going to learn about this story?
I don't know. I'm intrigued.
Nah.
Yeah.
I think the next arc is a knife fight in the Old West, but we'll talk about that at the end of the issue based on the cover.
He says he rescued the Gettysburg Address.
And
I like how he does old Simon, where he's serious. He's like, people don't change Albert. And then he goes straight into telling his cool story again.
Yeah. He's got or skipping a step than he used to or whatever. And he does say that he saved the Gettysburg Address from being used for all manner of blasphemous spells and rituals. So presumably somebody like the Founding Fathers cult is still out there. And he does say, I saved this country and everyone in it once again. So his whole vibe is one of a much more confident air. Up until this point, this conversation is meant to show us that. It's meant to show us how he has changed, how Einstein feels he's changed more than he feels he has. And we as the audience can really kind of gauge it for ourselves because we're able to observe them both. But as he does point out, like you said, Becky, as they begin to talk and they have like a moment of silence, he basically tells him that he's happy that he came, and he understands it must be hard for him to see him since he hasn't seen him since the last time when it was not easy, something happened. And even then, he's like, I still don't want to talk about it. Whatever this thing is, he doesn't want to talk about it. And then things start to get pretty serious, and there's a lot of conversation about mortality. Mm-hmm. It takes decades of living to be able to look back on one's life with perspective. And I wanted to talk about something with you, too, that this made me think about. Everybody usually has, especially as a kid, you have, what's your favorite superpower? If you could have any superpower, what would it be? And a lot of people do flight and invulnerability and blah, blah, blah. There's so many different ones out there. Claws like Wolverine, whatever. And I always wanted immortality. And whenever I wanted immortality, it was always because, especially like as a kid or a teenager, it was because thought if I was immortal, then I could take all the time I needed to do everything. I would just not have to move at anything past a leisurely pace. I was basically like wanted to be immortal so I could act like this guy, Simon. And the way that this conversation plays out, this issue, it makes you wonder about that and wonder what you would really do with it. Because when we first heard that there was this immortal character, I compared him to Wolverine, I compared him to the Eternal Warrior, and all these characters that usually really did good things with their time, right? And I was like, what the heck is this guy doing? And then reflecting on it, I was like, man, well, that's what I would have done if I was that guy, at least before I had a kid. I just feel like when we talked to Brian and he's expressed such sincerity about this comic book being rather self-reflective, that this is about telling the reader, like, hey, you need to make the most in life, because in this situation, literally Einstein, is saying, if you don't, you're going to be looking back on it without any time. And here's one guy that never had to look back. He could always get better, but he was stuck thinking he wasn't.
Yeah, his name's Simon Pure, but he's anything but that.
And yeah, I love that line. Don't stand in the river and watch us swim by like fish. Did Jeff come up with that? How is he so brilliant?
Yeah. What I love about that is it's one of those lines where it's like you have to have been reading the books and pay attention to the dialogue and the conversations they've been having. We remember that moment in the dark that Becky brought up that was reminiscent of the cover A. Mm-hmm. And when they first talked about that, and it's just great. It's what Ghost Machine is doing that's a whole lot more than what you just see in your typical comic book nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely.
I really dig it. And as they go, I do like how Simon does say he wishes he could give his life for Albert's. I wish I could save you again. That's just awesome. What did you all think of how he said, I love you like a son, Simon?
Just so weird because he met him. He is the senior to Albert. That's what's so weird about it. Like Albert became more wise, but Simon just stays the same because he even says it, right? Albert says it. Hold on, let me find it. Oh, time is relative to us. It passes differently for you. So I'm sure the pain is still very fresh. So like time to him is just so different, right? At what point in Albert's life did Simon become the child? You know what I mean? Because Albert was the child. At what point did that switch happen? That's what I would love to know. And see, that's what I want to see that.
I do as well. And we get a little bit more insight as to whether or not and when-ish we might see that over the course of the next couple of pages. Because ultimately this is leading us to the inevitable conclusion that anyone who knows about, eventually Albert Einstein dies, as far as we know, in history. And as much as we were hoping that time travel might alleviate that in the world of Ghost Machine, it appears it's not going to. And he is indeed going to die. But after he dies, we see these dates and what appear to be either like funerals or tombstones, right? And they begin 1782, which is shortly after he gets his powers. And we've been told in past issues that he had his first love died because of an illness at that time. So we know there's something related to that. 1845, we don't know what happens there, but we do know that I think that's like Old West-ish type of deal with Annie Oakley. We're going to hear about that. And 1909, significance of 1909.
To me, it looks like the loves of his life.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So, 1782 first, he gave it what is that, 60 some odd years to try again. And then every 60, roughly 60 years, he seems to fall in love, and then they die.
Mm-hmm.
And then Albert being another person in his life that dies. And look at that final splash page spread, to end the first arc.
Just Albert presumably having passed away in the bed and Simon with his head in his hands.
See, Brian Hitch should win an award for this issue. This is both him and Jeff. This is like an award-winning issue, in my opinion. This is what should be up for awards.
Maybe that's what we'll do, since they've got the Cheersies out there, and the Cheersies are like serious. We'll come up with something that's through Ghost Machine Fans that we do once a year that's not that serious, because we're really serious all the time. And
we are so serious.
And it could be like the Tearjerker. And then this would win the Tearjerker of the year for sure.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah,
for January, do the Machinies, the Ghosties.
Ghosties. We'll come up with something. The Phantom Awards.
Yeah, it'll just be things like best, Tearjerker, or, best splash page. Fun stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Best use of canned beans. It's happened in way more issues of Ghost Machine than not just Geiger.
I think we know what Jeff's favorite food is.
Cold canned beans.
Yeah.
He has a full British breakfast.
That's hilarious. Let's scrape them on. Now, last 2 pages of the book, we do see that there's a new arc coming called Blood Feud. And there's something serious going on in that. I'm not sure what time period it is. It made me think Old West, because you can see like a Winchester, I think, type of rifle with the sticking out there. But super.
And the colors is very like wanted poster.
Yeah, that's true. I do feel like there should be some tumbleweeds or something going on there with that type of style. Good point, Snoggle. Now, the Albert Einstein bio that's here. One thing I just wanted to point out about it is that it does indicate that after he goes back to Germany, he does start a family. And as he grows that family, he continues to adventure with Simon as well. And to some extent, he has to juggle both of those things. And then it does say very specifically, in 1909, Albert and Mr. Pure had their last adventure together for reasons unspoken, though both followed the other's life from afar.
And someone died in 1909.
Right, exactly.
Yes.
And that's also like, there are 2 different times when Albert mentions that seeing him must be painful for Simon because the last time was, and then quiet, etc. So there's something, whatever it is, we're gonna find that out, because that means they haven't seen each other, although they've been watching each other from afar. They haven't seen each other in 46 years. That's when their last adventure was.
That's so interesting. So you saw that, right? Sorry, in 1909, Albert and Mr. Pure had their last adventure together. 1909 is the funeral.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yes. So what that leaves me with, because I had the same reaction as you did, Mike. I want the continuing adventures of Simon and Albert,
Yeah.
And this bio makes me feel like we're going to have arcs that are going to be a whole, 6-issue arc of them doing whatever they're doing. And it's going to be great. And I imagine that intermingled with the more serious, overarching tale of the Unnamed and Simon and his journey. Because why would you hint at that if that wasn't something you were ever going to touch on? And it's also mentioned that he interacts with Annie Oakley and he becomes fascinated with her marksmanship. So we do know that, because that's coming up, that's going to be a part of the Albert will continue to be a part of the story through that. So that made me feel good, even though at first I was like, really? Right? This is happening right now? But at the same time, as long as we get the tales, we'll get the tales. And that's what we're going to get. Great issue. Way to bring us to tears, Jeff and Brian. And we have a listener mail that we would like to go over. It's an easy one, I think. Although we're probably going to defer to Michael as our comic book insider in this case to properly answer the question. It's from
I asked this question earlier.
Yeah, you kind of did. It's funny. You kind of did, yeah.
Don't worry, Allison. I didn't know either.
So Allison writes, long-time listener, first-time emailer. That was funny. No, but seriously, love your podcast. Thank you. And listen to it every week. What is the difference between a preview, a solicit, and an FOC?
Well, a preview would be literally previewing the comic, pages from the comic, the cover from the comic. A solicit is when it's actually available to buy. So it's being solicited by a seller for you to pre-order it. FOC is final order cutoff. That is the date in which you are cut off from being able to order it any longer through a distributor.
I have seen the confusion here between the preview and the solicit piece because
well, you could be previewing. I see previews all the time for the Ghost Machine books, but you can't. They're not available off of the distributor's website yet. Like, I can't go into my local comic shop. There could be a preview for First Ghost, let's say. And then I'll call my comic shop and say, hey, put me down for First Ghost. But they'll say, oh, it's not available yet. It's not solicited yet. Sometimes you'll get a preview while it's being solicited.
But ultimately, the preview tends to have more content. Like when Ghost Machine puts out a preview of an issue that's coming, they'll put like a few pages on there.
When do they do that? Do they do their previews before release week, or do they do it during solicits? I always find that they do their previews before release week.
But no, I've seen the previews where like they put the panels and stuff in there where like you can read a couple of pages of it, typically right before release week, like you said. Okay. And then the FOC push is more like cover advertising and other neat stuff, other content to say, make sure to reserve your copy. But we live in a world, Allison, where that FOC is the best way to get your comics, to guarantee you can get your comics, and to support the industry because it puts the distributors, the publishers, everybody, the creators in the best position possible to keep making more content for you. So make sure to do the pre-ordering as best you can. And thank you, Michael, for giving us the rundown. Well, do either of you have anything else to add to this wonderful Redcoat number 7 deep dive?
I am just so curious to know where this story is going now.
Yeah.
It's like I can't even imagine, and I like that, right? Yeah. Like in some ways it's so cool. But man, what a way to end it on such a downer, Jeff and Brian.
Yeah.
God.
Guys.
I'll be crying till Christmas.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, I agree with you, by the way. I think it makes me really excited for the next book. Like, really, that will be like a fun, exciting new beginning.
Yes. It'll be exciting to have a new turn of events, a new set of scenery and whatnot. And just really still liking how cerebral Redcoat is ending up being for me as a reader. So enjoying it, guys. Thank you so much. And if you want to check out all the rest of our content, you can do it by going to www.ghostmachinefans.com. You can also drop us a line at ghostmachinefans@gmail.com. Thanks so much for hanging out with us tonight on the Ghost Machine Fans Podcast.
Okay.
Yeah.